Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com, where music comes to life. And my guest today is probably best known for the 30 plus years he spent as the voice and bassist for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band Chicago. But now he's back with his friend Jay DeMarcus from Rascal Flatts and a cast of great musicians in a cool new band called Generation Radio. Please welcome Jason Scheff. Welcome, Jason.
How are you, man?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
You too, Jeff.
So now you and Jay have been friends for a long time. You guys have done some songs together over the years, but what led you to sort of formalize things and become Generation Radio?
Well, Jay and I met, I think, in 2002, and it was this cool moment for me where we were playing the Chicago, we were playing the Washington State Fair in Puyallup, Washington. And the lady who runs the venue asked me when I showed up, "Do you know who Rascal Flatts are?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, they're a country band and they're really starting to heat up." She gave me the Melt CD and with a letter from Jay, and I thought it was going to be a typical "Dear Chicago, we like you guys," but it was addressed to me. And it was that moment in my career where all of a sudden I saw a generation that was telling me that I was part of influencing them, my years with Chicago. And it was amazing to me because I didn't know anything about them. Frankly, was not really into country music, but the minute I put their record on, I absolutely could see the influence of not only just pop music in 80s, specifically with Chicago. And Jay and I became fast friends, and I started hanging out with Rascal Flatts a lot, and was right there watching them just go to extreme heights of success. And Jay and I were just joined at the hip. By the time Chicago was having the opportunity to go back in the studio for the first time, I think in 16 years, it was the work that Jay and I had been doing out in Nashville that was the spark that lit the flame. He produced Chicago 30. Right off on the heels of that, he said, let's keep this going and do a solo record on you. So, we started a solo project. And he always said that when things calmed down for both of our bands and us, that let's do something together. So, all of a sudden when Rascal Flatts announced their farewell tour a couple of years ago, he said, let's do it, man. So Dean Castronovo was, on Jay's radar due to the Crossroads that Rascal Flatts and Journey did together. So he called Dean, and Dean was going, "I can't believe this, man. I'm a huge fan of both of you guys." I said, "Well, it's unanimous." So we got together and started cutting some songs, and it was just magical. And so that's how it started.
Well, and I think Jay particularly is going to be a revelation to a lot of people listening to this record, because in this genre of music, I think everybody knows you, knows your work. But music just gets so segmented these days. I think you get people that think, well, Rascal Flatts, country band, I'm not going to listen to them. But I think when they hear this record and hear what you and Jay do together, he's going to kind of be the revelation of it.
I agree with you. And the name of the band, Generation Radio, really says it all. We've made, all of us have been a part of a lot of hit singles, and we are different generations. Jay is the next generation after me. When I look back and just pinch myself, when I joined Chicago in 1985, which really was, if you think about it, I think most people thought this is probably not going to work, and Cetera might, come back and work with the band after a solo record or two. But boy, everything took off. Peter had massive success with his solo record after Chicago 17, and we had huge hits on Chicago 18. So everything was up and running. So I always felt a little bit like, the real good years were the years before me, until all of a sudden you wake up one day and half of the 80s hits are the ones that I'm a part of. And then you get bands like Rascal Flatts that say, specifically, Jay's told this story. he's of that age. He's 10 years younger than me. So when he was exposed to Chicago, it was right when I joined the band. So I was like going, wow. So now this is your piece of the legacy. And that's why, you know, the band is really focusing on the generations of this music that's been on the radio.
Well, it's funny because I was just going to say the exact same thing to you. I mean, I was a kid in the 80s, and my first exposure to new Chicago music was you. I mean, naturally,
Wow.
I went back and heard the rest, but
Yes.
the new Chicago records coming out, and it's you, and that was my first exposure as well. So it's
Amazing.
There's a lot of us out there.
It's just such an incredible family to be a part of, and they continue. You know, I talk to people all the time about the fact that, you know, I think when bands like that, especially in the late 60s, start in this whole attitude and idea of this is the configuration that matters, and we'll never keep going if this isn't it. Yet all of a sudden, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, you see the generations that come up on that music, and it becomes a body of work. And I'm comfortable saying this, that I believe will go down in history as important as any of the classical works of, you know, of any composer. 200 years from now, 300 years from now, people will be performing and studying the music of Chicago. I totally believe that.
I agree. And you mentioned Dean Castronovo, who, you know, after recording the record, went back to the day job in Journey. You also have Chris Rodriguez and Tom Yankton on the record. I mean, all just amazing players. You talked about how Dean came in. How did Chris and Tom come about?
Well, Chris has been friends with Jay forever, and Yankton. Yankton was actually out on the road as a, you know, supporting guitar player and multi-instrumentalist. He was playing keyboards too with them. So when Jay said, Dean, you and myself, let's round this out with Chris and Yankton, really to have the vocals too. We were looking at it as not as far as the style of music, but the concept of like an Eagles, where everybody's a strong singer, songwriter, and that's what we went in with. And so I had known Chris over the years, but we hadn't, and we actually, when I think about it, we wrote something probably around 2009, 2010, you know, when I moved to Nashville. And so we all knew each other, but it was so much fun getting in a room together and starting to put a band together.
And of course, now for the live dates, with Dean back with Journey, you have Steve Ferroni on drums, so you're not missing a beat right there.
Oh yeah, I've known him forever. So so Dean, when Journey needed a little bit of help for Lollapalooza, I knew that they'd hear two notes from him and say, we got to keep him around. And, you know, and Dean was really, he was happy, obviously. That's a real home for Dean to be, but he loved being a part of this project and what we were all doing together. And so there was a certain amount of sadness that he wasn't going to be able to continue with us. But I have a very good friend named Steve Ferroni, and I said, guys, don't you worry. He may not sing like Dean, but boy, wait till you feel what this feels like in Steve. And he loves being there in the band. That's the thing I love. He's played with everybody, and the potential for somebody like that doesn't need to prove anything. He's only going to do the things he wants to do at this point in his life. And he has said, I love being a part of this band. He actually played the first single, Why Are You Calling Me Now, on his Sirius radio show. He's got something called The New Guy, I think, or something, that's Tom Petty, on the Tom Petty channel. And he played our single. So
yeah, and the cool thing about this record and the songs is, I think, like, if you made a Venn diagram of all the styles Chicago plays and all of the styles Rascal Flatts plays, they'll intersect kind of in that 80s pop rock sweet spot. And that's this record. It's a cool sound.
Yeah, the most common feedback is that people are really happy to hear something that sounds familiar.
Mm-hmm.
And Derek Basin, I have to say, our engineer, has made every Carrie Underwood, every Luke Bryan record, been involved in most of Rascal Flatts records. He's another guy who's he's the next generation under me, like you and Jay. And so he grew up on all that stuff. He's become one of Nashville's top engineers and mix engineers, obviously, like I said, with those country artists. But this is his passion. We were cutting tracks and Derek was just going nuts, going, like, why are you calling me now? Going, right back to, like, he says, this is era appropriate, with all of his mix stuff. We didn't sit around tweaking everything up and, fixing every tiny little thing. And so there's, it's got a real good 80s AOR feel to it. Although you nailed it, that there's a real variety on this record. And for me, at this point in my life, I love being involved in things that are, let's put it this way, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road is my Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band experience, being a record that was so diverse. You never got stuck on one sound. And so that's what I love being a part of.
Well, and I think that leads into the next point I had on it, is that when you listen through these songs, it's unmistakably you and Jay. Anyone that's familiar with your work will hear it in there, but it doesn't sound anything like Chicago or Rascal Flatts. You've created something entirely new. And for me as the listener, that shows me how much you care about this project, because it would have been really easy to do, okay, side A is Chicago, side B is Rascal Flatts. But you guys put the time in to really create something new using those parts.
So yeah, the songs that we started with for the project, I like to call Rascal Flatts Foul Tips. Because when I joined Chicago and we were going to make a record, every songwriter known to man was trying to get on our record. So you can imagine the great songs that were submitted, but there were only 10 slots, maybe 12, I can't remember at the time, available. So all the stuff that was left over was incredible. Well, this was what we were the beneficiaries of, that Jay had written with all the greatest songwriters in Nashville throughout his career. And so these handful of tunes that were sitting around are incredible. So we started with those and then looked at whatever anybody else had in the band. And to be honest, I was really looking at being an overseer of the project with Jay and making sure that Tom Yankton and Chris, their material, made the record to bring that identity into it. Also, funny enough, towards the end of the record, in fact, when we first started cutting it, when we were choosing songs, I almost didn't have any songs on the record, which was fine with me, because like I said, we were really trying to represent a cross-section of this band. But Yankton and I wrote a song called Why Are You Calling Me Now? That at the end of the song selection said, well, we should probably have that one. Like I said, it almost didn't make the record. And sure enough, it was our first single. So it was pretty funny how that happens so much with making records. The afterthought, what kind of man would I be? The last thing to make Chicago 19. Hard to Say I'm Sorry, I heard, came in at the end. If You Leave Me Now. So all these big hits that had come in at the end of the project. But so if you were to record those tunes that we started with as Rascal Flatts, they would have sounded exactly like that. You put us in the studio, that's how that came out, like you're talking about, that it can only end up sounding like the people that are in the room. So you're exactly right. We're bringing Journey, Chicago, Rascal Flatts into the sound of this to cut tracks. And so I love that what you said confirms that we achieved the goal to get the flavors of all the bands into it, and that's not really trying to do it. It's just, you know, roll tape and or hard drive and start playing, and you can't help but come out as who you are.
And as you guys are working these songs, you know, I mean, you, Jay, and Dean are all amazing vocalists. You and Jay are both bass players. How did you work out kind of who did what, or was it just natural as you played the song?
Well, Jay and I and Yankton, we're all multi-instrumentalists. And so, I mean, my role in Chicago really is mainly bass, as a bass player. Jay's in Rascal Flatts as a bass player, but Jay is such a strong keyboard player. And the fact that we were cutting, you know, starting with his songs, it made sense that he would you know, really take the keyboard role. We had talked the whole record about, yeah, let's switch up, but we were just having so much fun and just rolling through it that it kind of stayed that way. Although on Jay's tunes, his vocals on the record, I told him, just play bass on these, because it really just, you know, I know what it feels like to play bass on something that I've sung. And, you know, like, to give you an idea, but I just did a song for a Triumph tribute record that Mike Klink is producing. Yeah, and he said, you know, we'd love for you to sing. And I said, is there any way I can play bass on it too? Because it just changes the way all of you say, absolutely. So I understand, you know, playing bass on something you're singing. So Jay ended up doing that on the record.
Who does the bass run on Time to Let It Go? That little
That's
bass,
me.
yeah, right before the chorus. That's such a great part.
Thanks, man.
So now you guys have already done some live.
That was.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, yeah, that was a fun moment where Yankton brought this warp speed metal thing, and Dean, of course, is incredible. And we pulled a Rickenbacker off the wall and put a pick in my hand, and we just hammered that thing out. So without even thinking about it, that's what came out. Anyway, so you're talking about live.
Yeah, you guys have already done a couple of live dates. You know, do you see a bigger full tour coming once the album's out?
You know, we just had a great meeting with an agent that realizes that we probably should be focusing on, you know, fairs, festivals, and corporate, because, you know, once the record's out, that's when people start to get to know about the band. But until that happens, it's hard to really book, you know, Generation Radio if people don't really know about it. So yeah, we're hoping that the record coming out will bring the awareness up of what this is. But I think, you know, we're going to be really hitting fairs and festivals to just kind of slot it. Because one thing that happens, we do a lot of corporate dates too, and people are like, oh, okay, all right, I know who these guys are. But when we show up and play live, they're like, you know, more people want us to come and play their cities and events. So I think the combination of what we're doing live in this record will maybe by next year have us putting actual tour legs together.
Yeah. And, you know, we talked quite a bit about Chicago and your time there. And I was there the night you guys got inducted into the Hall of Fame 20 years later than you should have.
Nice.
and you know, part of me, you know, as we said, my introduction to Chicago was you. And part of me was really offended that they didn't include you in that legacy. You were there, though. You played that night. What were kind of your thoughts on that night and, you know, just the original guys going in?
Can you still hear me? Oh yeah,
yep,
you froze up a little bit there. But you know, when I think about it, like I told you, the day I joined that band, there was a part of me that's like, this is probably not going to work out. But it did. And like I said, you know, being a part of really 25% of the incredible history of the hits that Chicago has made, and my contribution to that, any of the other stuff you know, because I heard the original guys over the years struggling with the fact that the Hall of Fame was ignoring the band.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, you know, it's funny. It's an honor, obviously, but on the other hand, it's kind of, you know, what they've ended up doing as far as who they've inducted, who they haven't inducted, has kind of hammered the credibility a bit. I worked a lot with Todd Rundgren over the last, you know, 3 years, and Todd being inducted, and I was with him when it looked like he was going to be, well, actually even nominated for the first time. And I watched his attitude and energy toward it, and he didn't even show up, you know. And so to each their own. But to go out and perform at the induction and my name, quote unquote, not being a part of the, they went with the original 7 guys. And Danny Seraphin actually said to me when we finished, he goes, you should be inducted in this. I said, you know what, dude, I'm so happy the way this has all worked out, man. It's like you said, there is a demographic of people that came up during the years that the band first started, during the years that I joined the group, and there I am standing center stage singing 25 or 6 to 4 with Cheap Trick in front of me, my friends in Deep Purple, David Coverdale and Glenn Hughes, jumping up and giving me the high five. As far as my name being a part of it, doesn't matter to me, man. This has just been such an incredible ride. And for all intents and purposes, if people go and look on YouTube for the induction of Chicago in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there I am.
Like, you're there.
Oh yeah. You know, it's kind of hit and miss as far as like what the board of the hall determined. Some bands have had like 50,000 members that were there for like a year or 2 years. They're inducted. It doesn't matter, man. We're all in. As the manager of the band said, this is all of our awards. So I'm completely comfortable and happy with it.
And that, I believe, ended up being the last show you played with the band. I mean, was there anything specific that made you make that change, or was it just time?
Yeah, well, it's pretty well known that my in-laws were ill. Specifically, my mother-in-law, her breast cancer had come back, and they basically said, the treatment isn't working, so this is like the final march. And I was able to go to management and the guys at the beginning of 2016 and tell them, you know, it's I've watched this with so many artists, you know, that moment in time comes when life is hitting and you have to make decisions. And I'll never be able to thank these guys enough. First of all, for bringing me into their family, but when I needed to go home and take care of mine, that they were so supportive and understanding. And it's just a beautiful ride. In fact, the Hall of Fame was about 3 or 4 shows before the last one that I did, which was a sold out Madison Square Garden with Earth, Wind and Fire. And it's like, I mean, this is incredible. So.
Well, we've been spending some time here just with the incredible Jason Scheff. He has a great new record out with his pal Jay DeMarcus. The band is called Generation Radio. It's a fun record. It's just a great listen. Best of luck with it. And hopefully we can catch you on the road out here on the East Coast soon.
Man, thank you, Jeff. It's been such a pleasure to talk to you today.
Hopefully we could do it again soon as the next record comes and the next tour comes.
Absolutely, man.
You got it. Thank you very much.